Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. Though trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together, we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and today I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Dr. Reggie Thomas. We met on LinkedIn, and I just love following his work. It truly is a magical place to build community and relationships, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Reggie is a relationship guru, passionately helping leaders cultivate healthy relationships in both their professional and personal lives. With a doctorate in organization development, Reggie has leveraged his research on emotional intelligence to enhance leadership skills and workplace culture across numerous organizations. So I know we're going to have a great conversation because I love talking about all those things. As the president of Peak Potential, Reggie focuses on executive coaching, leadership training, and consulting. His extensive experience includes tackling issues related to emotional intelligence, JEDI, team building, conflict management, and organizational culture. Reggie's commitment to investing in others extends beyond the workplace, offering life coaching to help individuals achieve life balance, set boundaries, and discover their purpose. And when he's not busy doing all of the above, he is a husband and father and is also an avid marathon runner and has completed 35 marathons, including 9 Boston marathons. So thank you, Reggie, for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Haley. Good to be with you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Well, like I said, and when we were talking off screen, a lot of this podcast is talking about developing healthy relationships internally. Specifically as a fundraiser, my job is to master the art of relationships with our donors. But a lot of times in nonprofits, I've seen the struggle to build those healthy relationship and team dynamics internally. And so that's what I would love to dive into. So you've dedicated your career to helping leaders develop healthy relationships. Can you talk about what a healthy relationship looks like, define it a little bit, and then share some key strategies you use to help leaders build and maintain these relationships in the workplace?
So I think, Haley, what it begins, I think, with trust. I think that's probably one of the big pieces missing in relationships, whether you're talking about friendships or in the family, parenting, marriage. But I think specifically to this conversation, I think what we're talking about is the workplace, nonprofit organizations. And I think you have to have trust. I think trust is the foundation for any healthy relationship. And trust takes time. I have a 30-year career of managing people. And like most young leaders, I made a lot of mistakes early in my career. And then, of course, I learned as I led more and as I aged what was really important in relationships. And I think the big mistake I made was I focused too much on achievement rather than building relationships. And so I think it really begins with the leader. And I think it's the responsibility of leadership to develop what I call psychological safety. And that way you model building trust. And then if you model building trust, the people that you're leading within the organization, they're going to embody that, model that. But I think you have to create psychological trust. And so here's the way I've done that in the past. Number one, after I learned how to really lead well, I always said to my staff members, if you have any issues, any questions, feel free to come to me. And I think where that breaks down is a lot of times leaders will say that. And then when their team members challenge them or question them or even disagree with them, they get defensive. And so I think it's important when you give your team permission to freely come to you with concerns, listen, embrace it, and affirm what they're saying. I also think the way you create that is giving people permission to fail, have a culture of experimentation, giving people the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So I think it all comes down to psychological safety and just trust. I think that's the key to relationships.
Yeah, I think that's so important. In the work we do, we talk about sharing your fears and responding to those needs as a leader and allowing that safe space to be able to speak up and voice whatever is going on. So, you talk a lot about psychological safety, and I feel like now we're in 2024, and I don't want to say a buzzword because it is very important. The topic of psychological safety is an important topic that organizations need to be having. So can you define what psychological safety is and how leaders can model that a little bit more in the workplace?
Psychological safety to me, Haley, is creating an environment where people are free to express themselves without the repercussion of fear. And oftentimes people don't feel safe because they have this fear that they're going to lose their job or they're going to be punished for it. And so it's giving people that freedom to express themselves, whether that's disagreeing with you or having a varying opinion or having a different perspective. So it's giving people freedom to be who they are and to give them the freedom of expression.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And something I was just thinking about was I was interviewing for jobs recently, and every single person, the first interview or second interview was like, I want to make sure that you are a good culture fit. And I think there's a wrong connotation with that. So I would love your input on, I've heard you want a culture add versus a culture fit, because if I'm a culture fit, they're hiring someone that meets their criteria. There's not that space to speak up and have that diversity of opinion because you have to fit the mold of the organization. So can you talk a little bit more about culture fit and culture add and how that plays into creating a psychological safe environment?
That is a great question. And so I did a seminar recently on this very thing on culture. And what I did, Haley, is I drew an analogy with marriage. So in marriage, obviously, there has to be the right fit for two individuals to make that commitment. And so there has to be some synergies, some chemistry, some similarities there. But also, there needs to be enough contrast in personalities and perspectives so that you really enhance each other. And I think that same analogy fits organizations. You do want people that fit your core values, but you also want them to have a different perspective, different life experiences, work experiences where they can enhance the organization. So if you hire people who are exactly like what you already have, the organization tends to grow stagnant. But if you can bring people in who do share some of those similar core values, but at the same time, they bring a different perspective. That's going to give you the health that you need in an organization. So, yeah, I draw that marriage analogy. I bring that into the workplace because I think it's a very similar situation. You want enough similarities, but you also want some contrast there as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for answering that question in a way that was relatable and you could understand how to really define what culture fit means for an organization. And I think that's important. And also, I think another topic is you were talking about leadership, but you also talked about how you manage people for 30 years. And so I think there's a distinction between leadership and managing. And a lot of people are promoted into leadership without these skills or training. And I think it can be a learned skill, but can you talk a little bit about the difference between leadership and management and how someone can elevate themselves from manager to a leader?
One of the biggest mistakes that I have seen, and I work with different industries, Haley, law enforcement, law firms, manufacturing, and I see a common thread in most organizations, and that is if you're good at something, perhaps you're a good salesperson. And because you're a great salesperson, you get elevated to VP of sales. When really you don't have the leadership skills, you're a good salesperson, but you're not necessarily a leader. And I think a lot of organizations, what they do is they take their best people who are skilled in a specific area and put them in a leadership position, which they're not ready for. So I think leadership and management, I think they are cousins. They're not brothers and sisters. I think there are some differences there. I think good leaders do have solid management skills, but I've also seen good managers who are not good leaders. And so I think managers are more of your detail people. They do manage people, but they manage things outside of people, such as strategy and administration. But I think leadership is more high level. You're managing the vision, but also you're managing the culture. And I think that's the missing piece. I think a lot of people think that leadership is setting the vision, being able to see the vision, see where the company needs to go. But I also think leadership involves setting the culture. I think leaders are curators of culture. And I think a lot of leaders miss that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And one of the questions that I like to ask all my guests on the podcast, because again, everyone has a different answer, is how do you define culture? What does that mean? And how do you coach people to then implement it throughout their organization?
Well, so I'm a real simple person, and here's my definition of culture. And I sum it up in a question. And here's the question, Haley. What is it like working here? So the more technical definition would be those deep-seated beliefs and principles that a company believes in. And if you walk into any organization, they're going to have on the wall their 5 to 6 different words of what they value in terms of culture. And they might even have a definition. They might even have an action statement as to what that looks like. But my question is always, are you really living out those values that are hanging on the wall? So basically, there are professed values and there are real values. And the real values is, I think, are the way that people are behaving in the organization. So values to me are those deep beliefs and principles that an organization holds, but also it's the way in which you behave and relate to each other within the organization. And I've seen a huge dichotomy between professed values and real values. Even though they're hanging on the wall and people say these are our values, the real question is, are you behaving that way in the organization? Are people relating to each other? For example, if let's just say one of your values is empathy, as a leader, are you leading with empathy? And are your people behaving with empathy as they work together on teams? And so to me, it's what it's like working here. What's the environment?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question to ask and then get that input from other people, not just the leader. They can set the vision of what the culture is, but also get that buy-in from other people of this is what it's like working here. And they can co-create that future where they can work together to embody those values internally and externally. So your doctoral dissertation focused on the value and benefit of emotional intelligence, which is one of my favorite topics.
All right.
So how have you seen the principles of emotional intelligence transform leadership styles and workplace cultures in the organizations you've worked with?
So The reason I did my dissertation on emotional intelligence is number one, I got my doctorate at a time where I was struggling with leadership. And then also, just over the years of working with organizations, I saw this as a missing piece in leadership. And I have a completely different view about leadership now. I think leadership now ought to be about the soft skills. And empathy is one of those soft skills of leadership, but also it's a part of emotional intelligence. And so I think in the workplace, I think empathy is more important now than ever, mainly because of who's coming into the workplace. So I'm a baby boomer, so I'm on the tail end of my career, but what's coming into the workplace are millennials. And millennials are looking for empathetic leaders. They want to be cared for. They want to be appreciated. They want to be valued. When I was coming along as a young leader, even as a young professional, that really wasn't that important. What I was looking for, and people that are my age, what we were looking for in the 90s, we were looking for a job that had some prestige to it, a job where we can make a difference, a job where we can support our families. But what the millennials are looking for is they want to work in an environment where their leaders care for them. They feel appreciated. They feel valued. They feel seen and heard. So I think it's more important now than ever. So I think that's where emotional intelligence comes in, is leading with empathy. I love the title of your podcast, Leading from the Heart. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about, is more heartfelt leadership, where you really care about the people and it's all about the people.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Every single person, it's like our basic needs, but above food, shelter, and water is belonging and significance, and
Yeah,
on the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So it makes sense that people want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want to feel like they are important, not only to each other, but also to the mission, that the work that they're doing matters. And so I think creating that environment where people feel supported, they feel understood, helps increase that productivity that you're looking for all along, right? It helps you get the
right.
outcome that you want by taking a step back and leading from the heart, leading with empathy. And yeah, I love that perspective. And do you have any case studies or stories of the work that you've done where this has been implemented in action, where you've seen a leader transform the way that they lead?
Yes, I have. And so one of the things I do, Haley, is I do one-on-one coaching. I do a lot of seminars and workshops, and I do a lot of consultations around culture. But I think probably the most significant thing that I get to do is the one-on-one coaching. And I get a chance to coach anywhere from mid-level management up to senior leadership. And what I have found is a lot of these leaders, that's one of the things that they struggle with. And you don't get a chance to really impact change through the seminars. I love speaking, I love seminars, but where you really get a chance to impact change is when you're investing one-on-one. I have one person that I worked with about a year ago who was deeply struggling with this. And he hired me to be his executive coach. He was rough around the edges. He was one of those drivers, and it was all about getting the work done. And there was a lot of turnover because people just, they couldn't handle working for him. He just put too much pressure on them. I worked with him for about a year, and all of a sudden his leadership style changed. And it wasn't fake or mechanical. He deeply saw the difference that he could make in terms of the way he led. Now, that's a success story. I can't say that every person I coached have made that amazing transformation, but this one person did. Had this rough exterior, this rough personality, driver, and all of a sudden he changed. And again, what I liked about it was it became a part of who he was. One of the things that I used with him, I had him read a book, and you probably are familiar with the book. It's by Will Schutz, called The Human Element. And he said that people have three basic needs: inclusion, control, and affection. And I coached him around those three concepts. Inclusion, do I belong? Control, does my work matter? Affection, does anybody care about me? And that was the one he struggled with, was affection. He said, Reggie, he said, I'm not an affectionate person. And so just in working with him, he got it. And he began to see, and I don't think it was so much the coaching that I gave him as it was helping him to create an awareness. And what he discovered is that people started responding differently to him They wanted to work for him. They wanted to stay in his department. They wanted to stay with the organization. They enjoyed being supervised for him. And I think he got a buzz from just that type of response.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I haven't heard for that book, but I'm going to add it to my reading list of things to learn because I love reading and listening to audiobooks. And I think that's so important. And also in the work that we do through EMC leadership, we talk about how exceptional leaders are self-aware, that they understand, and that's what emotional intelligence is, right? Understanding your own emotions and how you operate, and then how they contend with others and how you can manage those relationships. So can you talk a little bit more about self-awareness and how we can cultivate that as leaders?
Yeah. So as EQ has four components, there's self-awareness, and then there's self-management, and then there's social awareness, and then relationship management. And I love those four things. And so self-awareness to me is number one, it's being aware of your own emotions. A lot of people think that good EQ is repressing your emotions, especially when it comes to conflict. Conflict is not solved by repressing your emotion or suppressing your emotions. It's about expressing them in the right way. So self-awareness in regards to that is understanding your emotions, understanding how you express emotions, understanding the negative ways in which you express emotions. So it's understanding what your strengths are, but also what your weaknesses are, and then managing that, how you express that. I can give a personal example. This surprises a lot of people because now I'm so calm and I'm a calm person now. But earlier in my life, earlier in my career, I struggled with anger. And I think the first part of my adult life, I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't aware of how I was coming across, how I was expressing my emotions. And when I became aware of it, one day I looked in the mirror and didn't like the person I was. I didn't like the fact that I had these explosive outbursts. So I became aware of it, and that motivated me to change. Now, even though I've changed, I still have that awareness because there's still that propensity to do that. And so, but being aware of it, I'm able to manage so that I don't have those kinds of expressions in my relationships. So you have to be aware. And then once you're aware, you can manage those triggers. So you have to be aware of your, not just the emotion itself, but what are those triggers? Are there certain people that trigger that? Are there certain situations that trigger that? That's what self-awareness is.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm honored that you would share your own experience of really facing that emotion head on. And a lot of the work that we talk about is conflict is never about the content. It's about emotional disconnection. So there are those emotions, their primary and surface emotions that come up. There's also raw spots and triggers. And so I think, yeah, it's really important to understand what is the root of what led to that emotion, what caused that anger, what caused that sadness, that grief, that shame, and then understanding how to change those patterns, or not even change them, just recognize them. And so what are some of the strategies that people can do once they become self-aware? I think naming it is important because that slows down your amygdala. That allows you to think logically and really try to see the bigger picture of the situation, right? And understand those triggers. So how can people, once they become self-aware and they're like, oh, I feel anger in this situation and this person triggered me because of this, like, how do they move forward and continue to manage that in terms of their relationships with themselves, which is important. I think it starts there. And then also the relationship with others.
So I'm glad you mentioned the amygdala. So let me, if I could get a little technical here to set this part of the discussion up. The brain is very complex. And When it comes to the topic that we're talking about, there's two primary centers in the brain. You have your emotional center where the amygdala is. And then, of course, you have the neocortex. That's that thinking part of the brain, the reasoning part of the brain, the rational part of the brain. And unfortunately, the way we are wired as human beings, whenever we experience something in life, the stimulus, whether that's a conversation or an interaction with a person, the first place that is processed in our brains is the emotional center. That's why we immediately react. It's instinctive. And so when you find your emotions being elevated and escalated, just pause. Don't respond in the moment. Think about it. And so you have to train your brain to do that. And most of us, it's just human nature. Instinctively, we're going to react. If you say something that hurts my feeling, what am I going to do? I'm going to immediately get back at you. But if I can just step back and think about what you've said and really think about my emotions and how I'm going to respond to you, I'm not going to let you off the hook. If you hurt my feelings, I'm not going to let you off the hook. What I'm going to do is I'm going to step back and go, okay, so Haley said this to me. I think it's unfair. It hurt my feelings. I do need to confront her about this. What is the best way for me to express that to Haley in a way where we can have a productive conversation about it? It's taking that pause. And I think most of us, we don't know how to do that. I don't think there's any tricks or techniques. I think it's just you have to make an intentional decision that whenever you see your emotions rising, just take a pause. Now, again, this is where empathy comes in, okay? Emotional intelligence is also stepping back and thinking, what is Haley going through today? There's something that Haley is dealing with today. There's something that's bothering Haley. That's why she reacted that way. But I think we have to make those positive assumptions before we just jump and react when someone hurts our feelings. So yeah, in order to get that stimulus from the emotional center to the rational center, it takes time and intentionality. Just taking the pause. Train yourself to do that.
I think that's so important to, like you said, relax that amygdala so that we can think. I think it's also, a friend of mine taught me pause, notice, and choose. So you pause, you slow down, you notice what's coming up for you, and then you choose how you want to have that conversation. And I think that's important. And also, I think it's an important distinction to make. We go through a reconnection form in EMC leadership where we do both sides. If we feel like we're in conflict with someone, we go through it on their side. And empathy doesn't make that person free of their responsibility in the conflict, right? It just helps us experience more love towards that person so that we can then have, like you said, a more productive conversation. So it doesn't make it right, but it does allow us to then slow down and say, choose how we want to navigate this relationship moving forward.
I love it. I've got to remember that. Pause, notice, and choose. I've got to steal that from you.
So you talk a lot. Obviously, you have a new book called Burnout Pain Points coming out. And I would love to know what sparked you to write this book now. Burnout is a topic being talked about a lot. And so what are the core components of this book and what inspired you to write it?
Haley, I was in New Jersey a couple of months ago. I was co-facilitating a conference with a young lady, and we got on this topic of writing books. And she said, Reggie, I will never write a book. And I said, why not? She said, there's nothing new under the sun to write about. And I was in the process of writing the book. I think I was early on in writing the book. And I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about how you don't write a book to share new information. You write books to share different perspectives. And so what motivated me to write this book, I'm going to go personal again. 4 years ago, I went through burnout. So when my book comes out, and if you get it and read it, you'll see that I tell my story. But I went through chronic burnout. And I think when you go through things in life, you develop a passion for it and you develop a high interest in it. And it becomes your mission in life to help other people going through those same struggles. And so I have a success story. I went through chronic burnout. I was a mess. I was fried. I took 10 weeks off from work. It was in my past career. And I took 10 weeks off and used that time to recover and to heal and to recalibrate my life. And since then, my life and career have been so much deeper and richer and more meaningful. And I always tell people now that going through burnout was probably one of the best things to happen to me because I took 10 weeks to slow down and really reflect on life and what I wanted out of life. So going through my own burnout experience is the primary motivation for me writing the book. Number one, I wanted to tell my story because I think when you tell your story, and by the way, the statistics indicate that over 70% of the people in the workplace right now feel some degree of burnout, whether it's mild or severe. It's something that people don't want to talk about. But I think when you have people that are authentic and they talk about their own experience, it gives people, first of all, it lets people know, hey, I'm okay. I'm in burnout, but I'm okay. I'm not weak. I'm not abnormal. I'm okay. But also, I think it opens up the door for people to talk about their own burnout experience. But the second thing I want to accomplish is through my burnout experience, the whole process of going through the pain of it, as well as the recovery process, I learned some things. And so I wanted to share principles in the book on how to prevent burnout. And if you're already in burnout, how to recover from it. And then I talk about what burnout is, what causes burnout. So it's a way that I give my testimony about what I went through and how I recover, but also there's some principles to help people with their own experience. So that was the motivation. There's thousands of books out there on burnout, but they're all unique. And I felt like my story is a story that I want out there.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And what you said is like to make people feel less alone. Because when you talk about burnout and the symptoms of burnout, people feel lonely. They feel like they're on this little island. They don't know how to reach for help. They don't know how to ask for help. And there's a lot of shame involved in it. It's our body responding to chronic stress. And so there's nothing wrong with us, but it's how our body is responding. And I think that's so important to be able to share your story and your perspective so that people feel less alone.
It makes them feel normal and it gives them permission to seek help. And so in the book, I'm very raw, very authentic, sharing my story, and hopefully it'll help some other people who are in burnout. So when the book comes out, help me promote it. Haley, help me promote it.
Yes, we'll put it in the show notes. We'll help you promote it on social media and everything. So I have a personal question for you because you have completed marathons and ultra marathons, which is a huge accomplishment, including running the Boston Marathon 9 times. And that course is not for the faint of heart, especially with that big hill. How has your experience as a runner influenced your approach to coaching and leadership? And what lessons can leaders learn from discipline and endurance required in running 26.2 miles?
Isn't it interesting that when you think about the sport of running, it is so metaphorical to life. There's just so many life lessons that you learn from running. And I actually have a keynote address on this, on what life lessons, what business lessons, what professional lessons we can take away from running marathons. And it's gone over very well. I think one lesson that you learn in life about running marathons is you need to pace yourself. Runners run at different levels. You've got your 7-hour marathoners and you've got your 2-hour marathoners, and you have to run your pace. And I think the lesson there is you can't compare yourself to other people. In business, you can't compare yourself to other business leaders. You can't compare your business to other businesses. You have to run your pace. I think that's one lesson that I've learned from running. Another lesson is that over the course of 26.2 miles, there are going to be hard parts. And usually you're going to hit those hard parts somewhere around mile 18. But at that point, it becomes mental. The lesson that I take away from that is in order to get through life, especially the hard times, you have to have the right mindset. Another lesson that I've learned in running is even though it's an individual sport, you do it in community. And so when I'm out there on the marathon course, struggling away, I look around me and there are other people in the same race. And so you do it in community. You need to build a community around you. And so I could go on, but there's just so many life lessons and professional lessons that we can draw from running the marathon.
Yeah, I'm a former runner, so I have my own leadership experience that now have cultivated in me, like perseverance and some of the characteristics that I carry into my leadership. So I think it is important. And maybe I'll have you back on the podcast and we can talk just about all the things you can learn from running.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Reggie, where can people find you and connect with you and learn more about the work that you do?
I'm on LinkedIn, and that is Dr. Reggie Thomas, real simple. And then Instagram is Regman308. And the reason it's Regman308 is 308 is my fastest marathon. So,
Oh, awesome.
yeah. And then I'm on Facebook, just Reggie Thomas. And then my business website is peakpotential.com. So, yes. So feel free to reach out to me.
Well, we will make sure to link that all in the show notes and share on our social media so people can click and follow you and learn about the work that you do. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Haley. And thank you for this rich discussion. And I hope it's helpful to your audience. And I look forward to coming back on sometime.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.